Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the launching session of Let's Talk Plastics webinar series. Before giving the floor to our director, just some housekeeping matters. First, please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. Please put your questions and comments in the chat box. Second, the session is being recorded. Unless we receive objections, the presentations and the Q&A summary will be posted on the Spark Blue later on, including the webinar recording. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Haoliang Xu, our Assistant Administrator and Director of Bureau for Policy and Program Support. Haoliang, thank you for agreeing to moderate the session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sulan. Greetings to all colleagues who are joining from all over the world. And plastics has become an entrenched part of our life, and we know it. Right? Just look at what you do every day. Contact with plastics, and it's in the water we drink and the food we eat, and sometimes it's in the air we breathe. And more than 50% of the plastics are used only once, the single-use plastics, right? And then we throw them away. And also, while the average use time for a plastic bag is 12 to 15 minutes, it takes 400 to 1,000 years, for plastics to disintegrate. It is worse than nuclear, isotope, to degenerate. So plastics waste, is harming marine life, right? Polluting our soil and water, and is finding ways into our bodies. Right? So as a leading global development organization, we have received the country's requests to support them to address these development challenges. Right? So about a year ago, we started to really focus on this. I asked Pradeep as the director of the Nature, Climate and Energy team to form a global task force to consolidate our experiences and develop our UNDP's global offer to work with our partners to address this serious and daunting challenge. And I'm very happy that he has taken this forward, and Sulan, as the head of the task team, also has done a lot of work, and that has brought us together today. Okay. So as part of the development of the offer, I'm very pleased to launch this webinar series, Let's Talk Plastics. And we're very happy that the government of Norway is co-hosting this first session, Reimagine Plastics and the Planet, which will be a stage-setting event for our online discussion towards shaping our UNDP's global plastics offer. I'm very happy that Lauren, the senior advisor from NORAD, is joining us today. So, so for today, I will first, give the floor to Pradeep and Sulan to provide an overview of our work in this area. And then, Lauren, from NORAD will speak about its work on plastics, especially in relation to ocean. And then we have a case study from Vietnam, given by ResRep Caitlin. And then we have head of circular economy from UNDP India, Sodhi, to provide a case study on India. Then hopefully we'll have a good amount of time for discussions, question and answers. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Pradeep. Over to you, Pradeep.
Thanks, Haoliang, and greetings, colleagues. It's great to be with everyone. Haoliang, you've given me more credit than I deserve. Actually, all of this work is due to the task team that Sulan and others such as Christine Gallier in BRH, Christine Wellington-Moore, Casper, and so many colleagues, too many to name, have been driving this collective effort of UNDP to try and get on top of this issue and really to come up with a strong, firm offer that can be made available to our client countries in order to tackle what really is a big problem, as we all recognize it. Mali, if you can help me, or sorry, Miria, if you can help me with the next slide. I mean, so the first thing is, obviously, why do we need this? Why do we need this offer? There are so many things that UNDP is already involved in, but why does this matter? The next slide, please. I think it does matter because at the end of the day, I mean, we all recognize that plastics are everywhere in everything that we do. And this does tie in and link up with a lot of the other development issues that we are addressing. Agriculture, whether we are dealing with resilience issues, whether we're dealing with nature-based solutions, whether we're dealing with poverty and leaving no one behind, in some shape or form, because the plastic issue is so much entrenched and interlinked with everything that we're involved in, it needs to be tackled. We cannot take care of the development issue without addressing the plastic issue as well in an integrated way. Next slide, please. And I think in that context, we also need to recognize that if we don't address this, the problem is just going to become bigger and bigger, and it will ultimately undermine many of the SDGs that we're working towards if it hasn't already done so. And the statistics are frightening, to be perfectly blunt. And for those of us who have little children, I mean, I cannot imagine this world that we are, putting them onto to face in a few years when they are a little bit older than they are now. And we know that now global plastic production has increased, nearly 2 million, from 2 million tons to around 360 million tons between 1950 and 2018. I mean, that's a frightening statistic. There's now four times more plastic that's produced today and in 2050. That's how much the increase is likely to occur. And as you said, Hao Yang, only 9% of this has been recycled. 12% of it is burned. A lot of it ends up in landfills, and far too much has been finding their way into the natural environment, with more than nearly 8 million tons of plastic ending up on the ocean. And I'm sure Laurel will speak to that in a minute. Next slide. So in many ways, if we cannot be dealing with the development issue as a development organization and touching on all of these SDGs that you see in front of you without addressing the plastics issue, it's connected to health, it's connected to water, infrastructure, cities, consumption and production, obviously at the core of it, climate action, and so on and so forth. So we do need to get on top of this. Next slide, please. And again, to say that if we don't by 2050, one of the statistics we've heard is, and this is something my 8-year-old repeats to me all the time, which is in a few years from now, not too far away, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. Something that she keeps reminding me, and she keeps asking me, what have you done about it? What are you doing about it? And the economic cost of it is staggering. And at a time when resources are constrained, we need to see where we can, achieve economies and certainly open up an economy that could help with addressing many of this issue. And that's around a 2.5 trillion loss per year if we don't get on top of it. Climate action. I mean, 6% of all oil and gas are used for manufacturing and transport of plastics. This is, I think, at the end of the day, the estimate suggests that the cumulative greenhouse gas emissions from cradle to grave of plastics may be around 56 gigatons by 2050. So that's 10 to 13% of the overall total carbon budget, according to some estimates that have been made. So, we do need to address this from a climate angle. From a health angle, and you mentioned it, we're eating, we're swallowing, we're breathing in about 2,000, tiny particles of plastic every week. These are what the studies are suggesting. That's about the same as swallowing a credit card worth of plastic. And that's just crazy. So we have to get involved in this. And now, particularly with COVID around everyone's minds, we've seen a drastic increase in plastic waste as a result of fighting the pandemic. with the increase of healthcare waste, packaging, and single-use plastics. And all of us here have been contributing to that by, using all kinds of plastic products to look after what needs to be done. So this problem is not getting any better. It's getting worse, and we do need to get on top of it. Next slide, please. So what do we do? And I think this is where we definitely need to look at some key principles. Next slide, please. What I've asked the team to focus on in coming up with this offer is I want something concrete for UNDP. I don't want us to be organizing workshops and consultations. I mean, there's been plenty of that. It's time for action, and it's time for us to show some leadership here to galvanize the entire system of the United Nations, as well as other partners, to ensure that we have really concrete, tangible, results-driven offer, something that is measurable, it's achievable, it's time-bound. We got to get as concrete as possible when we talk about this. We need to build off past experiences and lessons learned. So this is very much about an evidence-based approach. We cannot be throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing whether it sticks. We got to learn from the past and build that into the overall offer. We have to be open-minded and participatory. At the end of the day, we're just one player among many. So we have to try and channel the collective intelligence that is both inside UNDP, but also sometimes more importantly, outside of UNDP. But we can play a role as a facilitator to convene the kinds of partnerships that are needed. And I think that is very much in the spirit of UN reform and what UNDP in particular is better able to do than many others. So we need to leverage that. At the end of the day, we got to make sure that countries are at the forefront of this. This is not a problem that's going to be solved by UNDP or anybody from outside coming in and providing solutions or taking care of the problem. We have to obviously empower and embed the ability of countries to get on top of this. And that means making sure that they're foremost at the core of our overall offer. And finally, this is not complicated, right? We need to keep it simple. We need to make sure that it's understandable. And at the end of the day, it resonates with the people who must play a role in trying to address this issue in a collective way that really ensures that we act as one on this. Because anything short of that, we will not see success. So those are my guiding principles that I've discussed with the team. And I said, let's come up with an offer that tries to speak to these and stays true to these. And if we do that, I think we will be at the beginning of something that will hopefully, catalyze almost a mass movement of action and a coordinated one than what we're currently seeing within the UN system in terms of addressing the plastics offer. And if we can link up with many of our colleagues and partners in MDBs, in the bilateral world, I think we can make a difference. Sulan, over to you. You're on mute, Sulan. Sulan, you're on mute.
Thank you, Pradeep, for the excellent presentation. It's really hard to go after you and add something. Hao-Liang and distinguished panelists and colleagues, I'm presenting the following slides on behalf of the Global Task Force and the many colleagues we have been working with in the past 4 or 5 months. So when Pradeep asked me to hold the pen to develop UNDP's plastics offer, I went online dictionary to check what it means by offer. So here's the definition. It says an expression of readiness to do or give something if desired. So for me, I thought the key questions were, are we ready to do something? And do we have something to give? If yes, what are they? Molly, could you please, the next slide, please? So in my view, I think plastic pollution is waging war on our ecosystems and human health, as both Pradeep and Hao-Liang mentioned. So in order to win this war, I would like to go to some ancient wisdom and share some quotes with you. Sun Tzu, in his Art of War, 2,500 years ago, he said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you will win 100 victories out of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, your chance is actually 50%, 1 victory and 1 defeat. But if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Molly, next slide, please. So in our task force thinking, we thought that knowledge is key and fundamental to the all 4 key steps of developing this offer. It's knowing ourselves, UNDP, and knowing the issue we are dealing with, and knowing the actors and partners we can work with to tackle this challenge. And the 4 key steps, key milestone steps in terms of formulating the vision, analysis, consultations, strategy development, plans and projects development and implementation. All of them depend on the knowledge about ourselves and about the issue. Next slide, please. So actually, plastic issue is extremely complicated. The world haven't even agreed on some very basic questions. For instance, in terms of how much plastic has been produced and who is responsible for what. The Western countries say the Asian is the polluters, and the Asia blaming the Western countries to export the pollution to them. So our team wanted to gather the information and the scientific research and produce information sheets, mythbusters, issue papers, policy recommendations to better inform our team globally. And at the same time, we also wanted to review what we have done. We have actually done a lot in terms of our projects in the field on the ground, funded by GEF, bilateral donors, including government of Norway, and private sectors. But actually, it seems that our activities are scattered, and we need a coherent global theory of change to guide and coordinate our team together. So we are undertaking this analysis, and we're still in the process of learning about ourselves. And also in the Chinese proverb, we say that actually the most difficult thing to learn is about yourself. And I think our team has really learned during this process. It's not easy to find where our strengths and weaknesses are. Next, please. So we launched an online discussion forum. It's the first attempt for our global team to come together and share and contribute, inspire each other for ideas and actions. We have 128 participants who contributed 289 thoughtful contributions, and with 63 case studies collected from 32 countries. It's a large wisdom pool that our team is still analyzing and deliberating while we are developing the offer. Next, please. So when we're developing the offer, I think I wanted to highlight like 2 core blocks of building impactful and powerful strategies. And McKinsey, that has helped more than 900 organizations around the world to develop the strategies, organizational strategies, identified 2 core building blocks. One is really to ensure the team within our own organization has agreements, and we share a vision and know where the pathway towards achieving the vision. And the second is really to be prepared and willing to act on the offer. And we don't want the offer to be just a piece of paper. We launch it next year at a high-level political forum, and then we forget. It has to be the process of getting this together, galvanize the team to be mobilized and inspired for actions, for implementation. Next, please. So for the next steps, we will continue the engagement and consultations. For us, we think it's a process of building the team and coordinate our activities. It's equally important together with the result we are going to offer. We will develop and offer the first draft by the end of this year. And then from the next year, we are going to organize technical consultation workshops to fine-tuning the offer and prepare implementation in terms of programs and the partnerships development. I wanted to really thank and shout out to the task force members who have met every week in the past 4 or 5 months to come together and mobilize our support from around the world. There are many, many, many colleagues that we have worked with, and too many to name all of you, and some I'm sure are in this conversation today. I want to, on behalf of the team, we want to express our special thanks to Pradeep for your guidance and your inspiration and mentoring, and to Haoliang for your visioning and the strong support and leadership to create this space for us. And thank you, colleagues, for the panelists to join this launching session. And we continue this learning and knowledge searching journey with you all. Over, thank you to you. Haoliang, over to you.
So I think we needed to manage the time. Thank you very much first for Pradeep and Sulan for laying very clearly the ground, for our discussion. So to manage the time, we have about half an hour at this time. So we have 3 more speakers. So I would ask the speakers to probably speak for about 6-7 minutes each. And then, we hope to have some more time for discussion, okay? So Lauren, over to you, please. Welcome to our discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this first session of Let's Talk Plastics. It's really an honor to be part of the internal work you're doing at UNDP, and very exciting to be part of this process. Next slide, please. So why is plastic pollution important for Norway? And as it has been mentioned before, it's especially marine plastic pollution that we've been focusing on. So Norway is an ocean nation. About 70% of Norway's export earnings actually come from the ocean. But in 2017, there was a lot of attention to the issue of plastic litter when a whale was found off the coast of Norway with about 30 plastic bags in its stomach and other waste as well. And this, as you know, unfortunately has happened in several other places around the world as well. So in December 2017, at the United Nations Environmental Assembly, a zero vision was adopted for ocean plastics. And this was a resolution that was actually put forward by Norway. The same year, the Norwegian Parliament also adopted a white paper on the role of the oceans in Norway's foreign and development policy. And in that white paper, the issue of marine plastic litter was acknowledged as a growing international problem. And the following year, in 2018, the Norwegian government decided to develop a development program on microplastics and marine litter. And this is a development program that we work together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Climate and Environment in Norway. We work very closely together. Next slide, please. So I'll just say very shortly a little bit about the Norwegian development program. So the main goal of the program is to effectively contribute by reducing and preventing marine litter. And as you probably know, this is very much linked to SDG 14.1. And for the program, we defined 4 outcomes. The first one is to improve waste management, especially plastic waste management in partner countries, so in developing countries. And this, I should say, is the main outcome of our program. It's the most important one. The second one is to support cleanup activities, both in coastal areas and near rivers. But these activities often have to be clearly linked to awareness raising as well. The third one is to involve the private sector in the work against marine litter. And this could be everything from EPR, developing EPR systems, or enabling the private sector to fund waste management infrastructure, for example. And the last one of our outcomes is the normative work that we support. both globally, regionally, and also nationally. So developing, for example, national policies on marine litter. And as you probably know, Norway is pushing for a global agreement on marine litter, and we hope that negotiations for a global agreement can start at the next UNEA meeting, which is still planned for April next year. Norway has also pushed for some changes in the Basel Convention at the last year's meeting. And these changes on the transboundary movement of hazardous waste, which now includes plastic, will come into effect next year. I will also like to mention that Norway is co-host for the high-level panel on building a sustainable ocean economy. And the final report from the high-level panel will be published on December 3rd. And there are also recommendations closely linked to marine litter. Next, please. Yes, thank you. So what is the focus of our work? So we have currently about 40 projects and programs we're supporting, mostly through multilateral organizations. We have, for example, 4 projects with UNDP currently, 2 in Vietnam, 1 in Indonesia, and 1 global. We also support work through the World Bank, through the ProBlue Trust Fund that we helped set up, and also work of NGOs and research organizations. And we work very closely with national partners in the countries where we work. So I would like to just mention some examples of some priorities, especially for our work in the future. One is the informal sector. We know that the informal sector is very important in collecting and sorting plastic waste, and that this sector is becoming even more vulnerable because of COVID-19. The other one is innovative solutions, and here we're working closely with UNDP, but we also work with a Norwegian partner, for example, research partner, which is piloting the use of non-recyclable plastic in different Asian countries as fuel for cement plants. And this last one is changing mindsets. So working with advocacy through cleanups, for example, but also gathering data, monitoring, and giving input to the global agreement, for example. Next, please. So I was asked to make some suggestions for UNDP's plastic work, and I'm happy to note that my suggestions are very much in line with what Pradeep was saying, and I promise I haven't spoken to Pradeep before this. So we've seen some challenges already in our work on marine litter, and one of them is a lack of investment in general in the waste management. And maybe here UNDP could work with governments to create, for example, an enabling environment in partner countries for investments, both public and private, in waste management facilities and collection facilities. The other one is the need to involve more closely the private sector in the work on marine litter. And here UNDP could probably facilitate this private sector engagement as well. The other one is the need for better coordination, and Pradeep was also discussing this. As you know, marine litter is an issue that has attracted a lot of attention, both from donors and also different organizations. And we clearly see a need to coordinate the work between different actors on this field. And UNDP, given your country presence, you probably could have an important role to play to coordinate the work of UN agencies at the national level, and also through the resident coordinator, for example. And this is very much in line with the UN reform, which Norway, of course, supports. I would finally like to mention some opportunities maybe for UNDP's work and some food for thought for your discussions internally. One is to work through the Small Grants Program, which is funded by the GEF, to support some work in the informal sector, for example, or to scale up local innovative solutions. The other one is what I've mentioned, the fact that you have a strong local presence, and that could ensure, concrete results on the ground and local ownership, which is really important in terms of sustainability of the results. The other one is to work through with local governments, and I know that you have contact with very many different ministries. And for the issue of plastic waste, this is a topic that involves a lot of ministries. You could facilitate coordination between the ministries and also between the different specific agencies, UN agencies working in a country. And finally, we would appreciate, for example, from your in-country experience, if you could provide input into the work of the global agreement and what should be the content of such an agreement on marine litter. Next, please. So that's it. If you want to know more about our marine litter development program, you can follow that link and it will give you an overview of all the different projects and programs we're supporting. And if not, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roland, for this very succinct but a very informative presentation. I think some of the points you raised in terms of challenges and so forth, we can pick them up in the discussion session. So let me now invite Caitlin, UNDP resident representative in Vietnam, to talk about their work on plastics. And it looks like it's really a very interesting approach. So over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you very much, Hao Yang, and thank you, Hao Yang and Pradeep and Sulan and all the colleagues who really made this platform possible. It is very exciting to see us move in this way as UNDP in strong partnership with Norway to address this critical issue of plastics. We're delighted here at UNDP Vietnam to share some of our experience right now with this community of practice that's developing. And as some of you may know, I'll just start with a brief overview on the issue here, our approach, and some of the ways we hope to tackle. Just quickly, in terms of Vietnam, as many of you may know, it's already featured, unfortunately, as one of the top 5 plastic polluters globally. And we've seen a huge growth in both the production and consumption of plastics within Vietnam. And it's accompanied by annual population, economic growth, rapid urbanization. And we have seen a huge jump in consumption from 4 to 41 kilos per capita in terms of plastics between 93 and 2018. And plastic waste generation growing at 16% per year. So these are really sobering numbers. And in terms of marine litter, you can see it's visible on the beaches. At the same time, and I would like to stress here, there's strong political commitment in Vietnam at the highest levels to address the issue. And here the Prime Minister Phuc has been especially outspoken, calling for global action on pollution, starting with Vietnam. He's also called for action within the ASEAN framework as well. And he's actually committed, and UNDP has been delighted to support Vietnam with the first national action plan on marine litter. But let's just take a look on the next slide, what to do about it. And I think this is where we started to grapple with this issue more about a year and a half ago right now, together with the partnership with Norway. And I think it's been said by all the speakers before, is that it's really, really a super challenging issue. It requires addressing, the focus on both production and consumption. It talks about you need to be addressing collection and disposal of waste. You need to be engaging all different sectors and partners together. So we took a look, we scanned our own program to see what we could build on. And we started with a few basic assumptions. And the first one is that if we were really going to tackle this systematically and have a sustainable impact, we really needed to consider plastics in the context of a transition to a circular and low carbon economy. So we needed an integrated approach, address both production and consumption, and also engage very broad sector of society. We do need business, we do need the informal sector, we need the formal sector, we need government on board, we need UN agencies and development partners. In terms of our strategy, we looked at, if we were to have a systemic impact, we needed to be working at both at the upstream national level policy setting, as well as at the municipal level. And we also needed to very deeply engage with local level partners. And so that was one stream of thinking and engagement. The second one is that we really needed a lot more innovation in our approaches, and we needed much more impact at scale. So we needed to really start to look more seriously at how we went about and test different approaches. The third was looking at, and I think that we really needed to be working across groups within UNDP, and this means at regional level and also within our own country team. So we set up a cross-practice group to work on this that works from the environment, as well as from the governance team, as well as from inclusive growth. And then of course our accelerator lab at the core of this. And lastly was setting up feedback loops and fast learning so that we could learn as we went along. And in the process, we've developed what we call a portfolio of projects, which is still ongoing, in collaboration with government, in collaboration with Norway, to look at how best to contribute to both preventing and reducing plastic pollution in Vietnam. So the next slide, we just highlight it. We call it a portfolio. We're sharing with you the approach that we've used to tackle this in what we call a more integrated way. And here, the first space we occupied was the policy advisory. It's a core area for UNDP in tackling circular economy. We've helped the government define what that looks like. We've helped the government integrate that into socioeconomic development plans. We've helped develop the national plan on marine plastic litter. We also recognize that policy is not enough. One needs to act. And here we need to go more deep dive into the next circle of what we call engagement of vulnerable and impacted communities. And here, looking at, in the context of Vietnam, the informal waste workers are a critical group. They have a huge value to play, both in the sorting and in the recycling, and in terms of building the whole value chain of plastics that exists. So we looked at and building on and drawing from, and in this context, I would highlight this, the small grants program, and a brilliant, very small initiative in Hoi An that had a tremendous impact, engaging citizenry and the informal sector in the process. And together with Norway, we opened the question, suppose we took this model and applied it to 5 coastal cities, working with the same vulnerable populations, but looking at how we could develop and adapt the equation differently to enable waste workers to build a solid foundation as a business entity, and to loop into the different waste management systems that existed within the cities. So that was the start of a major program that we're now launched together with Norway in 5 cities. The second, we're learning as we go, and we've set up a learning platform between the 5 cities. And this is I would strongly encourage other country offices to look within their small grants program for work to draw on. The third area I would highlight is looking at sustainable business and value chains. And there is a whole value chain of recyclables. There's a whole value chain of what can't be recycled but can be used as an energy source. We've been working with creating circular economy training for businesses on how to become more sustainable, but then also looking at how we can link the informal sector with the formal sector. And here we've been working with a number of companies. Sintef from Norway is one, where they can actually take unrecyclable waste and turn it into an energy source. So there's a really interesting, complex way in which this can be broken out. That's another area. The third I would highlight, and innovation you'll see works throughout, but I do want to highlight the critical importance of innovation and experimentation. And here we wanted to draw more on the expertise that coastal cities are facing in Vietnam, but also ASEAN countries. I would highlight just one core initiative here. Together with Norway, we launched the EPIC initiative. That's the Ending Plastic Pollution Initiative, with the idea of sourcing really some of the most innovative approaches to addressing plastic and reduction of plastic throughout ASEAN. And in this first launch, we launched just a few months back, we have already sourced over 160 solutions, which will now be adapted in the context of Thailand and in the context of Vietnam. I just would also like to say, while we're branching out to source best learning from abroad, we're also doing deep dive within. Sorry, I think some colleagues perhaps need to mute. Maybe it's on the Vietnam side. We're hearing your family.
Also,
thank you so much. Yes, I'll wrap up. I think, Kao Young, you're muted, but I get your message. I'll be wrapping up. Just one last one, deep dive on systems analysis to waste management in Da Nang City. I just quickly, collective intelligence and multi-stakeholder platforms. And on the multi-stakeholder platform, I just would like to posit here that we have a unique opportunity with both Vietnam and Norway as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council to lead on ocean economy, and a part of ocean economy is addressing plastics. This is something that we're looking at jointly with Norway for Vietnam to be hosting an ocean economy conference. It was scheduled for this year, it will be postponed until next year. We also are doing a deep dive with partners, creating networks with business and with government and with the UN itself in terms of addressing plastic. So I just wanted to share with you an outline. Thank you. That's all for now. And I think if possible, we'll just shift to the video if it's working. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I will give the floor to Sodi now. In the office has been doing some really interesting and important work on plastics. Over to you, Sodi.
Thank you, Holyang, Pradeep, Sulan, and I must also recognize the efforts put in by my country resident representative Shoko Noda and Nadia Rashid. As you would see, I'll go straight into those 7 minutes which I have with me to talk about the India case study. Holyang, you would see that we work with the private sector. In the previous slide, we have 3 to 4 big private sector, Unilevers, Coca-Cola, Hindustan, HDFC Bank, and they are coming to support, as all of them have mentioned. And you would be happy to hear, Laureen, we started this experience through the small grants program in 2012 and 13, which is now extended to a $30 million program. And in the program, I'm just going to take you through the strategy and the approach which we have done is a more integrated waste management system, as Holyang and other colleagues mentioned. And in this, we have 4 major components to address. One is talking about the socio-economic technical model, where we are trying to establish a business model approach, Pradeep, the point you made, and where we are wanting to see that all stakeholders in the waste value chain get benefited. The second aspect of this is setting up small decentralized material recovery centers, and these are where the plastic comes in. I'll show you in the coming slides, and this is leading to improved waste management. And the third most important, which every speaker have said, and that is the linkage and the institutionalization of the waste pickers. And we are talking a great way to have the inclusive growth addressed to the waste pickers, their identity cards, their insurances, their health, and their general body checkup, so that they are being the most vulnerable, as you said, they are put into a better mainstreaming within the society. As Pradeep mentioned, we in the program are addressing more than 13 to 14. Poverty also is one of the goals which we are addressing in the SDGs. So the last component of all this is the traceability and the accountability of the material flow, with the EPR, the extended producer responsibility, coming in great way in India. Now, the private companies are coming, but they are giving us an integrated approach, a holistic in nature to really do. And we have set up various systems, what Kathleen also mentioned, and to create the material flow from the source to the end, so that we can have a proper accountability and we can have the proper EPR governance. Next, please. I'll take you through this. What we are proposing is a value. As I said earlier, we are talking of a value proposition in the waste value chain. Today, we have more than 45 cities where we are working, and in those we are working with about 47 partners, and we have collected from the grassroots to the final destination, nearly 45,000 metric tons over the last 1.5 years. And that 45,000 tons with absolute traceability from 40 to 45 cities, and which the private sector has come forward to support us. So the whole issue of the waste value chain we are trying to bring in is the implementing partner, the informal waste pickers, who are the central part of this whole show, the citizens, the institution, the recyclers. We are investing in small ways in all these people. We are working with the Government of India, with the Ministry of Urban and Housing, and they are coming very strongly forward. They in fact recognized UNDP country office, and Shoko was there on the screen with the minister, trying to share how the UNDP model has been recognized by the Government of India to put to scale. So that inclusive EPR, the private sector is not only trying to address through this investments they have made, their EPR compliance, they are going for a holistic integrated approach of circularity, trying to put in effort with us on resource efficiency, value addition, waste minimization. To the next slide, please. So what we do, how we go, we take a city with various parameters, and then we do the scoping study and baselines for 3 to 4 months. And then we have a proposal which we work with the urban local bodies. The ULB means the urban local bodies. We are not trying to set up a parallel system, but strengthen the ongoing system within the government seat. And then the letter of exchange happens between UNDP, HCCB is Hindustan Coca-Cola, HDFC is the bank, and Hindustan Unilevers. They all are having support to us in various cities of country. And then we do the letter of exchange, and then the whole engagement with the stakeholders, which I mentioned to the previous slides, begin. And then we set up the Material Recovery Center, and then the whole approach of traceability is brought. Let me go to the last slide in the show. This is the second last slide. So how the material flow takes place. So there are plastic manufacturers. They bring the consumer brands, then the waste is generated. We follow two views on it. One is which goes through the municipal waste value chain, we invest there, and the other is which goes through the informal waste value chain. So if you see the green one, the municipal corporation picks up through their trucks, the decentralized centers are being set up where the sorting takes place and they are being made, and then we come to the Material Recovery Center, which we call Swachhata Kendra. It means clean center. And on the other side, the informal sectors are also doing it. They are going to the intermediaries, we call them as scrap dealers and wholesalers. But with the coming of this project, they straight away bring their material to the Material Recovery Center, where we pay them and we don't deduct them. They are not put to harassment. In fact, they are brought into the inclusive growth, and then it goes to the recyclers. Different materials. We are doing more than 40 to 60 fractions of plastics and dry waste, and they go to different recyclers, and the recyclers bring back the money into the center. This whole business chain goes on. What is the Swachhata Kendra or a Material Recovery Center? I'll show you in the last slide, and I will then close. This is a typical recovery center which we have created. So any material which comes through the waste flow is the weighbridge, and then it goes to conveyor belts, then it goes to fatka machine, the air blowers, then shredding and baling. And anything which comes through the small informal sector, that is also weighed through electronic weighing scales, and that entire waste is coming into the center, is documented, and payments are made accordingly. And we are giving them very good systems in terms of basic amenities like safe drinking water, toilets, and safe working condition. Laureen would be very happy. Our main emphasis in this, while plastics is there, is also to take upliftment or mainstreaming of this poor and vulnerable section, which is the waste pickers, and regularizing them from the informal to the formal, bringing them with the government. And this data traceability then finally gives us to the impacts which the private sector is funding for. As I mentioned, this all is going with the leadership of Shoko, who is our res rep there in India. And the Indian government is coming forward day in and day out, and many private sectors are coming forward to us to invest money, and they see this as a clean way of working. Thank you, Holiang.
Thank you very much, Sodi. I had the opportunity to visit the Bhopal, the waste,
Yes,
and the processing center. I think, and I think as you're describing it, you're trying to achieve scale. That is a challenge for India, a country of 1.34 billion people. But I really wish you all the best in this important work. So let me open the floor for discussion. Okay. So I think. Any colleague who wish to speak, or either you post a question in the chat box, or if you try to raise your voice somehow, and raise your hand, and I will try to give you the floor. Okay. So who would like to start? First to post a question or make a comment, but short, so that we can have as many speakers as possible. I don't see anybody raising hand yet in the participants, list.
I have a question.
Yes.
Stefania, go ahead. We have some questions posted on the chat box. Stefania, please go ahead. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I posted my question in the chat box as well. It's a question for Lauren. I wanted to understand the hurdles to regulating plastic production in a country like Norway. I know that Norway doesn't produce nearly as much plastics as other countries like China and the United States and Germany and other countries like that. But nevertheless, they produce a lot more plastics than is necessary. I'm wondering, given Norway's commitment to addressing the plastic problem, what are some of the hurdles to regulating plastic production and investing rather in technologies or alternative materials that can be used in instances where plastic is not necessary?
Thank you very much, Estefania, for your question. I'm afraid I won't really be able to answer because this is a question that should be asked to the Ministry of Climate and Environment. But what I can mention is that these discussions will probably take place when the negotiations go forward on a global agreement, because what Norway would like with a global agreement is that each country has a national action plan on how to address the issue of plastics, and I guess it will touch on all these issues. Norway is also working on a plastic strategy, which I think will be finalized by the end of the year, so maybe there will be some answers to your questions there. I can also mention that Norway is quite advanced in terms of recycling plastic bottles, where you get money back when you bring back a plastic bottle to the store. And this is a kind of technology that a lot of developing countries are showing a keen interest in, especially India, for example. So Norway is looking at the possibility of transferring that type of technology, for example, to developing countries. And then this is plastic, high value plastic that is then, can be reused for new plastic items, for example. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Sola, maybe you can moderate.
All right, I just read some of the questions, or if colleagues want to turn on their video and speak, that's fine. One of the questions is from Vivek in Nepal, who's asking, what is the most efficient way of recycling? Does any of the panelists want to address this question?
Can I take it on, Sulan?
Yes, go ahead, Suri.
Thank you. I think Vivek is asking a very, very straight question, and rightly so. The efficient ways of recycling does not only lie in technology. Vivek, my impressions in the program I'm doing since last 10 years is not only technology, but the people and the processes involved in it. So I think so, we'd love to have you there. And the efficiency has to be brought in by a semi-automatic so that you can create jobs, you can create incomes for the waste pickers who are working there, and they in turn really make the waste minimization, because every plastic which is recycled, then you reduce the amount of virgin plastic to getting into it. So that value addition and waste minimization, resource efficiency, the circularity principles really need to be going with technology, people, and processes. I think you get it. Thanks, please.
I would like to add a little bit to that. And I think recycling, a lot of people think that it's almost complete reuse of the material. In the best case scenario, recycling almost means downcycling, because every time the plastic is recycled, the plastic itself degrades. And there's only a limited number of recyclings we can do with one kind of plastic material. So once it's produced, eventually and very quickly, it can turn into plastic pollution. I think maybe our team could look into this issue more carefully and prepare a kind of paper or guide note to help our colleagues to have better understanding of this issue.
Sulan, Nan Collins has raised the hand, and Pradeep.
Okay. Nan Collins, how do we?
Okay, thanks.
Please jump in. Yes, Nan.
Thank you. I would just like to share some short observation on technology, business model, and financing. On the overall, I think UNDP's engagement on the whole plastic recycling, I think we have done a lot through the innovation team in Asia Pacific. In addition to Vietnam, I see ongoing work in Maldives, in other countries. That I think a lot of work has been put into consultation, has been put into really early feasibility studies, looking at stakeholder engagement, behavior change, all these issues. But less really is invested into the concrete understanding of what type of solutions, technical solutions, and what type of investment is actually needed. And then how do we make those type of solutions sustainable? So even globally, I think organizations like WWF, which has done a lot of those advocacy work, but less on the concrete solutions on the ground. So what we see opportunity is that more kind of efforts and investment can be put into really understand quantitatively what type of how much plastic is produced, what type of recycling technology should be employed, who we can partner with, and what type of blended finance mechanism we can put in place, right? So a quick example is that we're working with the material lab in Maldives to really look into and building on what country office has done initially with the innovation accelerator lab. We see that a lot of consultation is done, but there's lack of really the quantitative data on what is actually needed, what type of equipments, what type of technology are needed, particularly for island situation, right? This distributed technology, which is really not that market investment ready. We really need to blend some of these grants, philanthropic resources, and the investment, together to really make it viable and sustainable in the longer term, and not in just for islands, also those remote area like Bhutan. We're working with Bhutan country office, also designing a blended finance mechanism for recycling. And same issue for those remote, difficult, small, quantities. How do we really come out with more distributed solutions, technology and financing packages to help these areas? So I think that could be a long-term agenda where we can work more broadly with private sectors, with impact investors, with all these resources to come out with more feasible and on-the-ground solutions. Over.
That's good. I think it's important to talk about the remote areas and how to deal with this small quantity but serious impact issues. I think we didn't talk about SITs, right? Because SITs, is seriously affected, by plastics issue as well in many different ways. So we don't have time now. Maybe Sulan, if since we've hit the 1 hour mark, we needed to close. So I would give the floor to Pradeep, who raised the hand, and maybe Pradeep, you can close the discussion as well. Over to you, Pradeep.
Sure. All right. No, I think, look, I think this is great in that this is the beginning of a process that we are launching. Actually, the process has started, but now we need to start getting into a concrete set of deliverables that we can coalesce around, and we really look forward to everybody's inputs on this. But one comment I want to make is that ultimately, while we can take care of a lot of things on the consumption side, on the production side, we also have to take on and have the courage to take on something that perhaps UNDP has not engaged in quite so forcefully in the past. And that is to ultimately face the elephant in the room, which is the fossil fuel industry. Unless we also engage with this sector and we try and effect the kind of behavioral change needed at the source, we're all going to be tinkering on the margins here. So we also need to think about, and this is something for us collectively to reflect on, how brave are we? If we're really going to try and tackle this problem, we got to go in big. And that is something that I think the team has to consider. We have to look at it from a risk management perspective for UNDP, and certainly that is going to be a concern. But what I'm going to ask is, let's not be shy here, because if we are on the right side of history, we should be pushing the envelope on all kinds of fronts, and that is also an important element here for us to take on. So something to take into account. Now, in terms of next steps, I mean, as Sulan outlined, this is to try and get us closer to a tangible offer that we can all be proud of and work towards this as sort of a guiding principles or sort of framework for UNDP, and one that will hopefully have initial shape, but one which will also evolve over time as we implement various things and we learn from it, and that constantly needs to be folded in. So I hope that many of the comments that have emerged through this webinar and a series of additional ones that will also be curated over the coming weeks will contribute towards that. So we really look forward to everyone's active involvement, because ultimately this is your offer. This is something that you will be working on, and you must have as much ownership on this as the task team. So we really look forward to the contributions on that front. Sulan, over to you, I think, for the final words.
No, just want to thank you, everyone, for your participation and your support in this journey towards knowledge and understanding. And we look forward to working closely with you in the next few months. Meanwhile, please stay tuned for the next webinar series in 2 weeks. We're going to have 6 webinars before the end of the year, and after that, it'll be every month. So if you have topics and speakers to nominate, please contact the team. I have posted the team email address, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you, Holiang, and thank you, Pradeep, Lauren, Caitlin, Sodi, and everyone for your contribution and the support.
So I see that Mate also raised a hand, but we don't have time, so please send your question to Sulan, okay? And look forward to engagement in this, really important effort with everyone. Thank you very much. We close the session today, okay?
Thank
Goodbye.
you.